The death penalty for drug offenses is retained by law in 35 countries and territories worldwide, but only a small number regularly carry out executions for these offenses.
Underwear, alcohol, syphilis, murder, forbidden. I've got my screw top wine. It's easy. I love screw top wine. It's sort of like crotchless panties. Like easy access, no muss, no fuss.
Yes,
Good to
yes,
drink.
yes.
We're
Crotchless
thirsty.
panties, which you don't want to see on any woman, I'm sure.
Never.
No, no. Well, it looks like a delicious wine that you're drinking, whether it be screw top or not.
It's pretty okay.
It's pretty okay. Shall we get into it?
Yeah, lay it on me.
All right. So this is going to be kind of short and sweet, but I feel like this is a real important one to report on this week to go with our current series. But just to get started, as of December of 2022, Harm Reduction International reported over 3,700 people were on death row for drug offenses globally. Malaysia, a major transit point for heroin from the Golden Triangle nations of Thailand, Laos, and Burma, views narcotics abuse as a major problem and has hanged 36 convicted drug smugglers since it imposed the death penalty in 1975.
And you mentioned the harm reduction. What was it? Harm reduction what?
Harm Reduction International, or it's called HRI. So they are one of my sources, as well as Amnesty International, Wikipedia, and LA Times tonight. But Harm Reduction International, I'm assuming, is probably like an Amnesty International sort of thing, that basically, tries to help people who are in trouble around the globe get out of trouble. But in the instance of this evening's story, they did not get out of trouble.
Oh, all
Yes.
right. Well, on that note, allow myself to introduce ourselves. Welcome to Forbidden, the podcast where we discuss the disgusting, the dark, and the disgraceful in our unmentionables. That's right, listener or viewer. We have slipped into something more comfortable, and we hope that you're doing the same with drink in hand, of course. I am Blake Roberts,
And I'm Amanda Kamada.
and this is our limited series. This is our last one.
It is.
Our limited series, Narcotic. In the shadows of America's opioid epidemic. Wait, nope, that's the wrong one. Look at me finding. That was like my specific teaser to my very specific thing. Hang on. I am so unprepared. Here we go. Yeah. From street corners to boardrooms, cartel strongholds to government cover-ups, this series explores how drugs shape lives, fuel violence, and quietly influence the systems we trust. Welcome to our limited series, Narcotic.
And this story actually scares the shit out of me because this is something that I've always, kind of had in the back of my head is what happens if you get into trouble, smuggling or even get caught with drugs in a foreign country. And I think that, they always say, like, when you're traveling, be very aware of who you meet, what they give to you, all of that kind of stuff. So, and I watched a couple movies back in the 90s that exacerbated my fears of something like this happening, and I'll talk about those later. But just to get into the story, several countries maintain the death penalty for drug related offenses, often as a mandatory punishment for trafficking certain quantities of controlled substances. While the exact number of executions is difficult to ascertain due to the secrecy in some nations around the world, available data highlights the severity of this practice in specific regions. And I think you'll kind of see a trend in like the areas where they're incredibly strict on drug offenses. And I have to say, I think it's just crazy in this day and age that there would be a death penalty for drug convictions of any kind, no matter what country you're in. And, like, I know that, like, the drug epidemic, particularly, in the United States and worldwide is, a huge, huge issue, but I don't know if it warrants the death penalty for something like that. And, most people who are on drugs, they aren't forced to take these drugs for the most part. They're going and seeking them out. So it's not like you're going and murdering somebody. Like I
Yeah,
know that, like,
cartel is
cartel,
right. That's a different story.
it's a totally different story, but, just people, selling or getting caught with things, I don't know. The death penalty just seems like such an extreme, punishment for this kind of thing. So, just let's talk about countries with death penalty for drug offenses. The number of global executions reached its highest level since 2015 in 2023, with at least 1,153 executions recorded. Iran counted for a significant portion of those, which with many linked to drug offenses. So, one of the countries, of course, is Iran. It remains the leading executioner for drug offenses with at least 485 executions in 2004, accounting for 79% of all drug related executions globally. And that's a statistic from Harm Reduction International. Um, in Iran, the drug related offenses counted for over half of all of their executions in 2024, highlighting the central role of drug control and capital punishment practices. Another country, and this is other than Malaysia, just a couple of other countries, China. While the exact figures are not publicly available due to state censorship, China is believed to execute thousands for various crimes, including drug related offenses, every year. Another is Saudi Arabia, that recorded a significant increase in executions for drug offenses with 122 confirmed cases in 2024, a 6,000% rise from the previous year. So if you think about that, 122 people were put to death in Saudi Arabia in 2024 for drug related offenses. That's a lot of people, you
Yeah.
know. And then in Vietnam and North Korea, while exact numbers are not confirmed due to limited information, executions for drug related offenses are highly likely in these countries as well. So, just a little bit about our guys in Malaysia who got in trouble. Kevin Barlow and Brian Chambers were two Australians executed in Malaysia on July 7th of 1986 for heroin trafficking, where there are mandatory death sentences for anyone found guilty of trafficking more than 3.3 ounces of heroin. They became the first Westerners to be hanged under Malaysia's stringent anti drug laws, which mandate the death penalty for trafficking in more than 15 grams of heroin. Their case marked a significant moment in an international discussion on the death penalty for drug related offenses. So, a little bit about them. Kevin John Barlow was born on Stoke-on-Trent, England. Some of the places in the UK have the weirdest names. Stoke-on-Trent.
Hmm.
For a minute, I thought it said Stroke on Trent, which would be a lot funner.
And then
Um,
there's strap on Avon
Strap on Avon.
or
Yes,
something similar.
something similar to that. I know it's very close.
Mm.
So Kevin Barlow held dual British and Australian citizenship and was a welder from Perth, Australia. He had a history of minor drug offenses and was reportedly recruited into the drug trade due to financial difficulties. Brian Geoffrey Shergold Chambers was born in Perth in Western Australia, but he was a building contractor living in Sydney. He had a more extensive history of drug trafficking and had previously smuggled heroin into Australia using body packing techniques and had been involved in multiple trips abroad for similar activities. So he had actually done this before. So basically, what happened is the two men met in Singapore and traveled to Penang, Malaysia by train, where they retrieved a package of heroin buried on a beach in November of 1983. Now, my guess is somebody had left that heroin for them, but I wasn't really able to figure out if this was just heroin that they found or if they had made, some sort. And again, this is from 19 they were arrested in 1983. So there weren't like lots of, specific details like how did the heroin get on the beach or whatever. But suffice it to say, they ended up with a package of heroin that had been buried on a beach in November of 1983. They concealed the drugs in a red suitcase and attempted to board a flight back to Australia. At Bayan Lepas International Airport, they were detained after Barlow exhibited nervous behavior and tried to avoid a luggage checkpoint. Both were detained, and upon inspection, the heroin was discovered in the suitcase. They were found with 6.3 ounces, approximately 179 grams of heroin concealed in their luggage. I think 6.3 ounces is a lot. Like, I'm not exactly sure. I don't do very well with the metric system,
Yeah.
but I think that that is quite a bit of heroin. So they had 6.3 ounces. Their trial, so they were arrested in November of 1983. Their trial began in July of 1985 at the High Court of Penang. Both men claimed the drugs belonged to the other, of course. But Chambers had acknowledged earlier ownership of the suitcase 2 days after the arrest. So he supposedly confessed to having it. But despite each of their defenses, the court found them guilty of trafficking under Malaysia's Dangerous Drugs Act of 1952, which mandates the death penalty for trafficking in certain quantities of narcotics. And then they were sentenced to death by hanging.
Wow, that's
That's like, I mean, it mandates the death penalty. That means that there are no questions asked if you are found with more than a certain amount of a drug, whether it was planted on you or you were actively trying to sell it or whatever, you are sentenced to death by hanging. They appealed for clemency, but it was rejected. And on July 7th of 1986, they were executed by hanging at Pudu Prison in Kuala Lumpur. Their execution drew international criticism and strained diplomatic relations between Australia and Malaysia. Australian Prime Minister at the time, Bob Hawke, described the execution as, quote, barbaric, a statement that chilled relations between the two nations for years. So, a little bit about their execution. They were led, handcuffed, a few short steps to wooden gallows as the cry of the muezzin, which is the Muslim faithful call to prayer, broke the morning stillness just before 6 a.m. They were then blindfolded and their legs bound, and a noose made of thick rope was slipped around each man's neck in the presence of a physician, a magistrate, and the prison superintendent, who were the three sole witnesses to the hanging. Without warning, a lever to a trap door was pulled and they were hanged.
wow.
Can you imagine? Like the terror
Yeah.
of being like hearing this Muslim call to prayer, which is in a way eerie in itself. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but
Mhm.
it's just like whenever I go to like a Catholic church or something like that, I don't like all of the singing, the hymns and the singing that they do. It just like really creeps me out.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's It's not even the fact that it's like a language you don't know. It's not the fact that it's it's like I don't know, it's like the religious tie to it that's
Mhm.
but the thing about that execution is I guess what I was expecting when you said hanging like a was that it would be like a spectacle, kind of like it used to be here, like in the Old West, where like the town would gather around and they would do it like at midday. And so there's this like long drawn out process to it. But it
Mhm.
sounds like it was pretty quick as far as
Yeah.
things go.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and afterwards, someone made a statement in a speech after their execution that says, "quote Anybody who violates Malaysia's anti-drug law will have to face the consequence. We cannot consider the color of skin, philosophy, or any matter in our fight against this evil." I mean, it's just crazy, like absolutely crazy. The case of Barlow and Chambers highlighted the harsh drug laws in Malaysia and sparked debates over the use of the death penalty for drug offenses. Their mothers publicly supported their innocence, and Australian officials continued to express opposition to capital punishment. The executions led to increased scrutiny of Malaysia's narcotics policies and their implications for foreign nationals. Their story has been dramatized in various media. In 1988, I would love to get my hands on either one of these. A 4-hour television miniseries titled Barlow and Chambers A Long Way from Home was released. And additionally, a 2004 Canadian film, Manners of Dying, referenced the executions through the name of its main character, Kevin Barlow. This case remains a significant and controversial chapter in the history of capital punishment and international drug law enforcement, and a poignant example of the complexities surrounding international drug laws and the death penalty. And yeah, that's the short and sweet story of Barlow and Chambers, who were the first Westerners to be sentenced to death for narcotics in the or abroad. And so they were in Malaysia.
I know there's like that series which probably doesn't run anymore, but that Locked Up Abroad, and then which I'm sure we'll get to.
Mm.
But where my mind immediately went with this was, and it always sort of terrified me too, was it Singapore where that kid was arrested for vandalizing something, is like given a bunch of like he was like whipped essentially.
He was caned.
Yes, he was caned. That's right. I
Yes.
can't remember exactly what he did.
Right, right.
Do
I
you?
think I think that he may have allegedly stolen, I think that he got caught stealing something is my thing. But the thing is in Singapore, you can't even chew gum.
That's I remember gum being part of it. I was like, did he steal a pack of gum? But no, I remember them talking about that. Yeah. At least
Yeah.
then. I don't know about now, but
I don't think that Singapore is a place that I'll be visiting anytime soon.
yeah, and that's sort of what terrifies me about traveling to countries that are, not like first world countries
Mhm.
or that are sort of led by religion or
Yeah,
whatever is another thing that scares me is like, well, but what if I just do something wrong, like I do a gesture or I chew some gum or something that's like so innocuous and
yeah,
it's that thing that's gonna like result in some serious punishment.
yeah. I am totally hooked on, like, Locked Up Abroad and those type of shows or, oh god, what is the one called where they're going through,
Airport security?
airport security? That's the one that I'm trying to think of the name of, and I meant to look it up before because I literally Contraband. It's Contraband, I think.
There's another there that maybe that's one, but there's another one. Okay, well apparently there's one on National Geographic. Oh, I think this is the one that I watch. It's called Airport Security.
I think the one that I watch is called Contraband.
Yes. Contraband, seized at the airport, that's one. And then To Catch a Smuggler.
Yes, To Catch a Smuggler, thank you. Um, so, most of those are, in the United States or the Dominican Rep they're always in Miami. They're always in at JFK, they're in
Mhm,
the Dominican Republic, Colombia, Spain, but these
mhm.
are all countries that, like, I love watching people, try to smuggle things in and, see how they get caught. The ones that, like, really, just blowing my mind are the ones that will swallow like balloons or condoms full of cocaine or
Yeah,
heroin and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh my God, if one of those things exploded in your body, you would be so done for. And how do you swallow like 100 of those or whatever, however many they do? It's crazy.
right,
It's crazy.
you'd have to, rub it in, I don't know, bacon
Oil.
or something.
Yeah, bacon grease, and then get
That's
it down, but then
delicious and
you have to
painful.
poop it all out too.
Yeah,
I mean, there is nothing about that that seems like it's worth with the money that they are being paid to do it, because it's always, like, a really low amount of money, like, I feel like they're making to do stuff like that.
yeah, and those are always so fascinating too because you can always tell they'll be sitting there as they're being investigated and they start sweating and they start, looking ill. It's because they have
Right.
to shit out all these balloons of whatever.
Yeah, I can't imagine how full you must feel, to like, if you think about eating a big meal and how you feel awful after that, but eventually it kind of passes because the food's breaking down in your system, whereas this, it's not. It's just sitting in your system waiting to travel through your body.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the thing is on those types of shows, like, yeah, they're gonna go to prison for a few years or something like that, but they're not gonna be sentenced to death. I mean,
right.
this is absolutely crazy. So I love watching that show, and then there were a couple of movies, and I can't help but think that these movies were somewhat loosely based on the story I just told, because they were both, like, made in the '90s. One of them was set in Malaysia. I don't know if you remember these movies or not, but one was called Return to Paradise, and it came out in 1998, and it has Joaquin Phoenix, Vince Vaughn, Anne Heche, and David Conrad in it. And basically, the premise of that is that Joaquin Phoenix, Vince Vaughn, and David Conrad's characters are friends that spent a vacation in Malaysia, and one of them decides to stay and continue to work on environmental causes while the other two go to the US. And 2 years later, they're tracked down by Anne Heche's character, who is an attorney, who tells them that their friend was arrested in Malaysia after they left for possessing the leftover hash that they had all been sharing, and that he was sentenced to death unless those guys returned to Malaysia and confessed to doing it as well. And so it was one of those movies, um, where there was the juxtaposition of these friends having to make the moral decision, like, do we go back there and confess that we were a part of this, because he shouldered the whole thing on his own and was sentenced to death and would be executed if they didn't go back.
But if they did, does that mean they're also going to be executed?
um I, what I believe happened was, it was one of those things that, um if they shared legal responsibility, they wouldn't get the death penalty because the amount of hash or something that he had, or some, I can't
Mm.
remember exactly what it was. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that movie because that movie scared the shit out of me.
Yeah. Oh, that gives me anxiety thinking about it. I love Joaquin Phoenix, especially back then. He was so hot when he was younger. I
Mhm.
love Joaquin Phoenix. I did not like Vince Vaughn, so
I
he
know
could.
you don't like Vince Vaughn, but you do like Anne Heche,
I do
so
like Anne Heche, and I don't know who that other guy is.
I don't either. But this must have been kind of a theme in the '90s, because there was another, movie called, and it had Claire Danes, Kate Beckinsale, and Bill Pullman, and
Oh,
I kind of remember this one. I actually remember watching um, Return to Paradise. Like I recall seeing that one. Broke Down Palace, I'm not. So the synopsis of that is Claire Danes' character and Beckinsale, and Kate Beckinsale's character, they go on a graduation trip to Thailand and are arrested at the airport when heroin is found in their luggage. And basically, what happened in that story was in that movie was that they met a man and he put drugs unknowingly in their luggage. And it kind of shows the journey that they went through, to kind of try to prove their innocence and stuff like that. And that one was set in Thailand.
Mm.
Um, so neither one of them were like box office gold or anything like that.
I remember Broke Down Palace. I never saw it, but I remember that title. I don't
Hmm.
remember the other one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
But I have a feeling that, like, I have a feeling it was probably loosely based, a little bit with the hanging and everything, Return to Paradise on those guys from
Mhm.
Australia, because it was just a different twist on it. Instead of heroin, it was hash, and it was about, friends. Someone just wrote a screenplay, I think, loosely based on these things that happen abroad to people.
Yeah.
And
It's like a 90s version of a 70s movie. Like the
yeah.
70s movie is the one that ends with like a really tragic end, like the real story, and then the
Mhm.
90s sort of softens it just ever so slightly.
Right, right. Yeah, but I mean, I think about, especially when I was younger and just being stupid, like the thought of like how easy it would be for you to meet somebody, backpacking around Thailand or, any of these
Mhm.
places, and being like, hey, yeah, let's travel together, because people, I don't know if they still do, but they used to do that all the time, like backpacking around Europe and stuff like that. You would just meet a couple of people and be like, hey, you want to travel around together for a couple of days? Sure. You
Yeah,
know,
let's go backpacking on the moors and hopefully a werewolf doesn't eat us.
there you go. But can you imagine, like, I mean, that would be my luck is somebody would put drugs or something in my backpack and then I
Sure,
would get
Amanda,
caught with
somebody
them.
else would put drugs in your backpack.
But you've got to be careful, kids, because, like, I think about now how, we've laxed the drug laws on THC and stuff like that so much in so many states in the United States, which is amazing. Like, I fucking love that, marijuana is legal in so many states and it's so easy to get your hands on legal THC and all that kind of stuff. I am actually drinking a THC drink this evening. It's called Can Higher Boy Grapefruit Rosemary. It's very tasty. But I keep thinking about, like, you got to be fucking careful
Mhm.
about taking like little gummies or things that you can buy so easily here and taking them to other countries, because you could truly get like into some serious trouble. And I think that there is going to be a surge in this happening, because I think people are like, the more that marijuana is more widely distributed here legally and all that kind of stuff, you just don't think about the fact that
Yeah.
it's illegal anymore. It would be like carrying a little like airport bottle of vodka, with you in your purse or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're getting arrested because you have gummies.
Yeah.
That would
Well,
be crazy.
you know, take my recommendation, take a can of what's it, Ready Whip, take some VCR cleaner and just do you can't get arrested, right, for doing whippets and poppers?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. No, you're probably good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
They
whip
wouldn't even know what it is.
get high, open up your butthole. Relax and enjoy.
Enjoy your vacation.
Yeah, not behind bars.
What this does tell me, though, is that there are a certain number of countries that I'm not going to visit. One of them being Malaysia, one of them being, I mean, definitely Iran. I mean, I would never go there anyway. You know, it's such, it is just, that country is just dangerous. You know,
Yeah,
North Korea is off off the table for
I'm
sure.
pretty sure I could be executed or imprisoned in either of those countries for being gay. So
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
off
Sometimes
the
you can
table.
get the death penalty for that, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, forget drug offenses. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy.
So much for that song. Go where you want to go, do what you want to do.
No, no, you
Mamas and papas had no idea.
no, you gotta be vigilant. You gotta be careful, folks. And if you're leave your gummies at home if you're going to these countries, because I don't know what they classify too as being narcotics. Like I know in the Dominican Republic, there seems to be a an attitude towards marijuana that by officials, that is not by, like, it must be, you know, what they feed the general population or something like that, but it seems that they think that marijuana is just as, or, you know, more serious than like cocaine down there. And I'm like, there's a big fucking difference in marijuana and cocaine. You know, I mean, just I'm talking about just in like being addictive, which marijuana is not. You know, like all of these like different like class A versus class whatever drugs, you know, that like I don't know. And so you never know what country is going to view something like marijuana, which we seem like we view it as kind of like drinking now, like what another country is going to, you know, think about it. So be
Right.
careful with those gummies, folks.
Yeah. Ugh. I love gummies when I'm traveling, but not like I'm talking about like the sour gummies, like trolley or whatever. Like
Or
actual candy.
yeah, like actual candy. I'm like, I'm not familiar.
I know. I'm such a sucker like on a road trip. That's always my first thing that I get at the gas station is sour gummy candies.
That's so funny. I get like Funyuns.
Funyuns is good.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
Funyuns. I like combos. Like I'm more savory on my
Mm.
vacations. I'll do beef jerky.
See, I like a
Um,
mix because I also need protein. I get hangry, so I'll do like beef jerky, and I have to like it's all about balance, Amanda.
yes,
The three food groups: savory, sweet, and alcohol.
savory, sweet, alcohol, and THC.
The fourth food group.
The
For
fourth
road
food group.
trips.
Exactly. Um, so yeah,
Well, that was terrifying.
it is a bit scary. Yeah.
I feel like I've my anxiety levels rose the whole time you were telling that story.
Yeah.
So
Well,
thanks
I
so much.
mean, I just I mean, there's an instance of, you know, they were guilty, you know,
Yeah.
obviously. You know, they obviously were, you know, they had dabbled in, you know, drugs before, and, you know, distribution of drugs and stuff like that. One of them had done it quite a bit. The other one was kind of just dabbling in it, for financial reasons or something like that. But I think my question would be, how many people have been like framed or been put on death row or just serving prison time who were unaware that they were carrying something abroad, you know,
Hmm.
or just in general, you know, how often does that happen, you know, or get caught with like what we would think is not a lot of something and then got put to death because it was, X amount of heroin or cocaine or something like that. Because, I wonder how many, what percentages too of these hangings or, the carrying out of sentences for, drug offenses globally, how many of those were foreigners and how many of those were actually citizens of their country, you know?
Right.
Because I feel like China will put anyone to death like that,
Right.
and there's no telling what North Korea is doing.
You know what? A fun series to watch. Well, it's multiple series sort of under the same umbrella is Joanna Lumley,
Hmm.
as we know, Patsy from Absolutely Fabulous.
Hmm.
She has a whole series of travel shows that she's done for BBC, and I love them. She's just such a wonderful person and personality.
Yeah, I love her.
Super endearing. Like I love her for her character in that show, but I also just genuinely love her. And she has a really, have I talked about this with you before?
I feel like you have, but I don't know if it was on the podcast or just like us chatting about it. But either way, I don't remember what your point was with it. So go ahead and revisit it.
So it's not like a typical travel show where she's going to like I'm like Paris or Fiji. She's going to some really sort of unique travel experiences. For example, she did the Spice Trail. So she like travels the Spice Trail.
Hmm.
She did, I think it was like the Orient Express. So she like took the train from China through Mongolia and into Russia. And it's sort of terrifying. Like there's moments where she's crossing the border and there's like crazy things happen. There's like some weird stuff that happens in China.
No
Uh,
fucking way I would do that. Like
no, me either.
you could not get me on a trip like that. No way.
No. But
No,
that's why I love that series is because she's like getting up there in age. She still looks fabulous, of course.
of course.
But the fact that it's not like a glamorous, it's not a vacation, you know?
Kind of more like what kind of like in the same vein as like Anthony Bourdain, sort of off the beaten path, a little bit raw,
Yeah,
a little more raw, like not, lifestyles of the rich and famous.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, and she does a good job of balancing like different class levels within a culture. So you kind of get to see in some cases like the upper echelon versus like the lower caste, you know?
Hmm.
But it's pretty interesting. It's a fun series. You should it's I think on BBC now has like there's BritBox, there's BBC Select, which is the one that series is on.
Okay.
There's so many different streaming platforms. It's so annoying.
No, it's hard to keep up.
It is.
I love it though because there's always something to watch.
I just don't like having to like. I wish there was one hub where you could search for everything and it would tell you, it would be like, okay, it's in this. So it just takes you versus having to like navigate out of one app and into another app and you just have to search and you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's just
yeah,
annoying.
yeah. No, it is.
I'm ready to go back to cable.
Well, I mean, here's the thing with all the different apps. I can't remember which, like you said, which one has what.
Hmm.
And, like, because one will have like Dynasty and one will have The Price is Right, or two may have The Price is Right, but one has like the Bob Barker years,
Right.
and then there's one that has like forensic files, and one that maybe has like unsolved mysteries. And I can never remember like the difference in Tubi versus Pluto versus
Right.
Max versus, like I've got pretty much everything except for Hulu, I think.
Yeah. I basically rely on IMDb because it tells you where it's streaming. So I constantly am searching IMDb to see like where that thing that I want to watch is streaming before I
Mhm.
navigate to each platform trying to find it.
Yeah.
Super
Well, I wish
irritating.
I were that smart, but I end up navigating to different platforms.
Well, at least you're not navigating to different countries with drugs in your ass.
No, no, I won't be doing that, folks. That's something that I will not be doing because I'm I'm scared of adventurous travel, I think, a little bit.
I want to
You know?
sit. I want to sit my ass on a beach in a speedo and work on a tan with a cocktail.
Yeah. I can't work too much on vacations, you
Mm,
know? I mean, I am not like the type of like that's why like I want to go to Europe really badly, but it takes so much planning, and I feel like you have to do something when you get there, like there are these different, it's like I need to go to this place and go to this place and go to this place, and I just remember like that kind of stresses me out. Like I
me
need to go
too.
somewhere and be able to just decompress,
Hmm.
rather than basically not going to a city, going more so to like a very small, like I think I would enjoy probably like maybe a day, 2 max maybe in London or something like that, and then try to go out somewhere and be like, "Oh, this is the countryside. This is where I can have wine," and
Yeah,
not be like
that's where I am with it. Like I don't want to travel like a great length to some destination and not experience the culture. Like I want to do that, but I want it to be a nice balance of like maybe a day of like, hey, let's go look at this museum or let's go check out this historic pyramid or what the fuck ever. And then the next day it's like, no, I'm on a beach, decompressing, recharging,
Mhm.
drinking a cocktail
Yes.
in a speedo
Yeah. Or I'm, lounging at my country house in the garden with a
in a
glass of
speedo with
wine
a
in a
yes,
Speedo. Yeah, I mean, just something I think it's different for us too because like we lived in New York, we've lived in
mm,
cities and stuff like that. So it's like a city's a
God,
city's a city wherever you go. The difference is the culture, and like the weight and like the architecture and all that kind of stuff.
right,
But it's any city is still going to be chaotic.
yeah,
It's gonna, you're going to have, your issues with any city that you go to around the world. And I
yeah,
think sometimes I'm just like, I just don't want to go to another city. Yeah, I want to go to like a beach or go to like a sleepy town that maybe has a beautiful lake or something like that.
yeah. So I guess our question for you, listener, is where would you go and what would you smuggle in your ass?
Yes.
And you can let us know either, drop it in a comment if you're on YouTube or email us at hello@theforbiddenpod.com.
Yes. Or you can put it on our social channels. We take comments there on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at the Forbidden Pod.
We take them orally, we take them anally. Give us those comments any which way you would like to share them with us.
And then if you want to go to our website and see some really outdated information, you can do that at www.theforbiddenpod.com.
Or as I
Um,
like to call it, the archive.
the archive, which is a shit show in itself and a project that I have really it's become a lot more than I thought it was going to be, and it's my fault. And anyway, working on it, guys. And then what else? Anything else? Don't do drugs, kids. I guess that's the whole premise of this narcotics thing is don't do hard drugs and be careful if you're traveling with them.
That's right.
Well, Blake, thank you for listening and being terrified of my story.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Amanda.
And listeners, as always, we Thank
Thank
you.
you.